Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I would like to thank Professor Matucci and Cecilia for this kind invitation. My name is Pedro Ivo Ferraz da Silva. I'm the head of the Science, Technology and Innovation section of the Brazilian Embassy in New Delhi in India. I'm speaking from India right now. And I'm also one of the co-organizers, together with the Institute of International Relations of the University of São Paulo, of the Innovation and Science Diplomacy School that took place in São Paulo in August this year. So I have the pleasure to share this presentation with my colleague and friend, Luiz Fernando, who will talk right after me. I will just, for 10-15 minutes, perhaps talk a little bit on the, let's say, concept of innovation diplomacy. And my colleague, Luiz Fernando, will talk about Brazilian innovation diplomacy as a specific case of innovation diplomacy operationalized by one country. So in order to understand the concept of innovation diplomacy, I think, first of all, we need to, I'm trying to, just a second, I'm trying to switch to, yeah, okay. In order to understand the concept of innovation diplomacy, I think, first of all, we need to draw a conceptual line between what science technology is from one side and what innovation is from the other side. Of course, there are between science and technology a huge difference there as well, but I just want to draw your attention to the specific differences between these two blocks. When we talk about science technology, we are basically talking about, I mean, the keywords that come to our mind is basic fundamental research, for example, applied research, development, validation tests. So the ultimate aim here is advancing understanding and also achieving usability, achieving new uses for new technologies. Whereas innovation, I would let's say here offer an interpretation that innovation is mainly economic term and is more related to keywords like market access, investment, mission-oriented, scale. So the ultimate aim of innovation is impact. So, here I quote, for example, Professor Weiss from Georgia Tech University, that he says it is not innovation until it's in widespread use. So scale and impact is, let's say, at the very core of the concept of innovation. And if we translate this to the two areas, and sorry here for the slide problem with the slide, but here we see there are some, let's say, differences in the diplomacy area in what science diplomacy means and what innovation diplomacy means. We'll have a full block on science diplomacy. And so I'll not get into details here, but what I would say to summarize here in this specific slide is science diplomacy is more targeted more towards cooperation, so as a specific focus on cooperation, whereas innovation diplomacy has a focus on the development of national technological capabilities. So it's more of a tool, a diplomatic tool, in order to achieve or to increase one country's innovation capabilities. This is, let's say, a very important differentiation. Of course, these two areas are not completely different from each other. I think there are tools that are quite common to both of them, specifically some cooperation tools. But when we talk about, let's say, the main focus, I think here we have a clear differentiation. When we talk about innovation diplomacy, basically we are talking about practices that are not new, whereas the concept of innovation diplomacy is rather new. So before innovation diplomacy became, let's say, a relevant topic, countries and governments were already promoting trade in high tech, so high technology, or have also developed tools and strategies to attract R&D investment. We heard just now, let's say one of the main strategies or main priorities is also traditionally from governments is from the government side is to enable international technology transfer. Also the internationalization of one country's own technology firms has also been a traditional, say, policy. Capacity building and mobilization of human capital, that's also important. And here we touch upon a specific topic, which is the mobilization of the diaspora, of science technology diaspora, and also partnerships between national and foreign companies and institutions. So these are areas which I would say fall into the umbrella of innovation diplomacy. They have been activities that were more and less coordinated, but since the past 2-3 years, since the topic of innovation diplomacy came up in literature and also has been pursued as one strategic focus of chancelleries around the world. And here I can mention some countries have abandoned the term, for example, scientific counselor, have moved to the term innovation counselor in some embassies. So this is a term that has been increasingly in use in the past 2-3 years. All the activities that we can, let's say, associate it with have been practiced for more years, let's say decades. If we go to into each one of these specific sub areas, we can, for example, get some interesting examples from some countries with regards to the attraction of investment, specific R&D investments. So here, for example, Ireland, through its development, its IDA agency, has perhaps one of the, let's say, agency that performs this in a better way. So it has a strategy especially focused in the attraction of foreign investments that would, let's say, so to convince companies, broad, large multinational companies to open R&D centers in Ireland, in the country, and through that not only offer high quality jobs for the population, but also to, let's say, increase the opportunity of technological spillover within the country. We have some other types of agency like Vinnova in Sweden, which is a funding agency, at the same time has this task of attracting R&D from foreign firms. We have a specific program like Innovate in Brazil that was championed by Apex some years ago, which had this very aim in mind in attracting again R&D intensive industry to the country. The Department of International Trade of the UK does the same, and also in the regional domain, like some states, and here I'm giving the example of Karnataka, one state here in India, which through specific, which let's say is the high technology hub here of India, and through specific events or specific programs also has this aim of attracting R&D intensive industry to the state, to the region. One other aspect is the international technology transfer. I believe this table is not very well readable, but this is a model that was conceived by two professors, two brothers from Denmark called Lemas. They have typified all the, let's say, they have classified the different types of international technology transfer that take place. From conventional to unconventional types of technology transfer, from, let's say, very high intensity technology transfer to low intensity. So, for example, the lowest, let's say, intensity of technology transfer would take place in a simple trade transaction, import of hardware. From a developed to, let's say, by a developing country from a developed country. FDI, foreign direct investment, establishing of a foreign MNC in a country that, let's say, is also technology transfer, but let's say with a higher content. Joint ventures, licensing agreement. So it's not only a classification, but you have here some grades in which, let's say, more or less technology transfer take place. Here, again, some interesting examples. The Norwegian oil industry is the growth, development of the Norwegian oil industry. I think it's a perfect example of how, let's say, FDI can be used for technology transfer. Very short, so up to 1971, where oil was discovered in the Norwegian continental shelf. Basically, Norway, of course, didn't have any knowledge at all of the oil industry, of how to drill and pump out oil. And by making foreign investment conditional to investments in universities, and also by creating national institutes devoted to research in oil and gas, Norway has been able to gradually build up its own and strong, very strong oil industry. And today, the Equinor, formerly known as Statoil, is a multinational company which has oil fields in more than 30 countries and is a major also technology leader with also very interesting spillover effects in various industries like the automotive industry and so on. Another interesting example of international technology transfer that have used many different channels of technology transfer is the Chinese photovoltaic industry, which, let's say, was practically non-existent by the beginning of the 2000s and as of today. Through many, let's say, joint venture licensing agreements, specifically with European multinational. So as of today, the major suppliers and, let's say, innovative companies in the solar industry are Chinese companies, for example, Suntech. And here I would just give an example of a specific project which is very, let's say, close to the Brazilians, which is the Gripen project of these aircraft. It's a project involving Saab, the Swedish supplier, and manufacturer of jets, and at least five Brazilian companies led by Embraer, which is, let's say, it's for one side it's a commercial transaction which the Brazilian Air Force has acquired 36 jets, but this, in their contract, it implies a massive technology transfer from Saab to Brazilian industry, so that the, let's say, those industry will be enabled to produce by themselves also fighter jets after a certain time. This is a picture of the first test flight of the first jet that was, let's say, manufactured within that contract. Here also another activity that falls into the innovation diplomacy, the internationalization of technology companies and mainly startups. So this ranges from simple visits of startups, organization of simple visits, startups from one country to the other. Here we have an example of a mission of, let's say, a visit of Brazilian startups to China. We have innovation missions, which has, let's say, a more, let's say, has a preoccupation of, let's say, have a thorough preparatory process and has more focused on results. And we are now, let's say, experimenting with the cross-incubation program between countries. And here I have, if you allow me, to give an example between India and Brazil. Is something that we are starting next week is the first cross-incubation program of agri-tech startups between India and Brazil. So for 2 weeks now in December, 5 Brazilian agri-techs will be coming here to India, visit 2 agri-tech innovation ecosystems in the country, and 5 Indian startups, agri-tech startups, will be visiting Brazil in April, May 2020. And it will be, let's say, a real, say, soft landing program in which entails, of course, some visits, field visits, but also actual pitch sessions with farmers, with possible investors, and large agri-corporates. So it's a very result-oriented program, and the idea is that through this, let's say, partnership between India and Brazil, we facilitate market access and also facilitate technological partnerships between companies of the 2 countries where agriculture and technology is particularly relevant. Also, one other tool of innovation diplomacy is the mobilization of science technology diasporas. I think also we have, let's say, we see the migration specifically of, scientists, of technologists to other countries. Traditionally, we have been seeing this as very negative, especially from a developing country point of view. I've been even terming it as a brain drain. But there are some actually very good examples. For example, the Indian diaspora in the US and UK have been key in facilitating market access for the Indian IT companies. So the Indian IT sector is well known all over the world and exports on a yearly basis more than $100 billion. And this penetration in these, let's say, markets are by largely it's, let's say, has been facilitated by the Indian diaspora. So I think it's the mobilization of these diaspora, for example, talking about Brazil, the Brazilian diaspora in developed countries, I think is, and also in developing countries, is let's say, a major tool that we should use and guide towards, let's say, can use as a very efficient tool for innovation diplomacy. And also cooperation is also part, as I said, of innovation diplomacy strategies. Here we have interesting, let's say, model that also comes from India, which is adopted by Global Innovation Technology Alliance, which launches periodically joint calls with partner countries, and sponsors technological development involving companies from India and the partner countries. So that's also another tool of innovation diplomacy I consider very relevant. Finally, last but definitely not least, I would like to draw your attention to the Innovation in Science Diplomacy School that I briefly mentioned at the beginning. It was the first, let's say, course that international course that has dedicated considerable amount of time in the discussion of innovation diplomacy as opposed to science diplomacy. It took place in São Paulo at the end of August, and it involved 80 students, 40 Brazilians, 40 from abroad. It was a program sponsored by FAPESP. And I think the main result, which is actually going to be released in a couple of days, is the São Paulo Framework of Innovation Diplomacy. It's a document that we have created, we have drafted, and now finally concluded within the context of the Innovation Science Diplomacy School and the participants. And it's a document that, let's say, gives a definition or suggests a definition of innovation diplomacy and the practices that it entails. Well, that was it. Thank you very much. I think I ran a little bit out of time, but anyway, thank you for your attention, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to share some views of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Brazil about the subject and some initiatives that we have with the European Union. My name is Luiz Fernando Machado. I'm the head of the Division for Technology Promotion at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Brazil. And we also coordinate here from Brasilia the work of our sectors of science, technology, and innovation in our network of embassies and consulates abroad. We have the perception that, well, to tackle global problems, humanity needs to devise technological solutions, and for true innovative technological solutions to be created, we need the engagement of government, academia, private sector, and society as well. It's not just the triple helix, perhaps the fourth helix that we're talking about. That's the reason why the Brazilian government is shifting the focus on international scientific and technological cooperation to the demands of the society, that is to innovation. We think that European Union is also taking on this trend, since one of the pillars of Horizon Europe, the European Program for Research that is going to start to run in 2021, is innovation. Horizon Europe is favoring a mission-oriented approach towards the research projects. We are quite excited to be able to join European counterparts to contribute to the missions, to overcome challenges that are not just European challenges, but challenges for all the humankind, such as health the oceans and the fight against cancer. We have significant participation in the current projects of the current program of the European Union, the Horizon 2020, as a third country. And we expect to have a stronger participation in the program Horizon Europe, with this stronger focus on innovation for joint projects. We are celebrating 12 years of strategic partnership with the European Union, and we believe that this will not be ascribed to the political field, but should also encompass other fields such as science, technology, and innovation. We are aware of the limits of these cooperations, as stated by Ramon earlier on, but this is the reason why we operate in 7 different levels with our European partners, not only with the European Commission, but also with European countries. And of course, we try to coordinate these efforts. Within the framework of the strategic partnership between Brazil and the European Union, we have begun an official sectorial dialogue on innovation with the European Commission to exchange best practice, not only in terms of policies, but also in terms of actions, of initiatives. And Brazil is currently designing a new innovation policy, and we will send to the Parliament a draft law on startups, so we are quite keen on discussing with European experts and lawmakers about mechanisms to encourage innovation within our societies. We believe that diplomacy should underpin and support these movements. In the case of Brazil, a country with a big territory and a big market, with a tendency to be encapsulated with its reality, we believe that diplomacy has an important role to play to open new doors, to showcase the technological solutions created by Brazilian researchers and entrepreneurs, as well as to find the right match between Brazilian researchers and their counterparts and entrepreneurs and their counterparts abroad. There is a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings regarding the technological potentialities of Brazil in science and technology innovation. And diplomats, alongside with scientists, researchers, and entrepreneurs, had to find a common language to promoting the country abroad. It's not easy, but we have already some very successful cases to share. When it comes to a common language, it's not easy to make all these groups to understand each other. However, if this common knowledge is not reached, the goals will not be met of finding technological solutions with impact for the national society and for the humankind as a whole. This is the reason why the initiatives of science and innovation diplomas of Brazil abroad are now being concentrated in a program called Innovation Diplomacy Program. The Brazilian Chancellery is stimulating that the actions performed abroad should be a joint effort of scientists, researchers, entrepreneurs, and diplomats. In order to implement the program, we have created sectors of science, technology, and innovation throughout our diplomatic and consular network. The sectors are headed by diplomats, but these diplomats receive information, are trained about our national system of science, technology, and innovation, so they can be able to identify opportunities and engage in a dialogue with researchers and entrepreneurs. They work also as focal points, so researchers and entrepreneurs can access them directly when they need information and connections with local innovation ecosystems. We have achieved so far very exciting results, among them by organizing our scientific diaspora abroad and connect them with Brazilian counterparts. Pedro has mentioned our efforts carried out in the United States. We're now having the third meeting of our diaspora in Washington, D.C. next week. But actually, we have chapters in all major American cities that they are self-organized. So some of them they have websites, some of them have LinkedIn or Facebook pages. We had this year the first meeting of our diaspora in the UK and also in Sweden. So the embassies help in this effort of mapping this diaspora. We are having also at the end of the year the first meeting in Dublin, in Ireland. And next year we have already several plans from several different countries. So we are really creating a network of Brazilian scientists abroad, and we believe that we can benefit from this network to create these links with our national networks of researchers and entrepreneurs. In terms of results, we are fostering the creation also of networks of science parks and technological incubators. One example is the iBRICS network, the Innovation BRICS network, because we believe that when startups of one country get to know, which are usually headed by scientists, by researchers, they get to know better the markets and necessities of other countries. They can not only contribute to better solutions to the host country, but also bring to Brazil important insights and learnings to enhance our own technological solutions and the competitiveness of our economy. By showcasing Brazilian startups and research abroad, we are bringing the perspective of a country in the South Hemisphere, in the tropical zone, with its problems that are shared by many other countries in the same situation, and whose technological solutions may apply and contribute to the benefit of these societies. We believe that we can enrich the international debates on technology and innovation. After all, we are witnessing a concentration of technological density in some areas of the world, leaving entire continents, a huge percentage of humankind out of the debates. I was personally very worried to get to know that in the special edition of the Global Innovation Index 2019, among the top science and technology clusters, there are no clusters in Africa, and in Latin America there is just one cluster in São Paulo. There is a clear room for improvement to share the benefits of technology among the world. And only by promoting innovation diplomacy, we think we can reach progress and develop so much needed innovation technological solutions for our societies. I have just shared, I have ended my presentation now. I'm open for questions. I have shared the link with a video of the first meeting of the Brazilian diaspora in the UK. Unfortunately, it's in Portuguese. But maybe most of you could grasp the main messages. I'm happy to say that also our embassies, they have partnered with Unicamp, which is the University of Campinas in Brazil, and with FAPESP to map the diaspora and to help to make these connections. This is another example of the triple helix actually in action. So we are very happy about that, and we believe that we are reaping the benefits of this, the organization of this diaspora in the coming years. Thank you very much.